because I don't want to forget anything to share with you guys. I'm going to be asking you some questions and try to engage with you as much as possible. And I'd love to hear your feedback along the way. So, I'm curious, in this room, how many people are in human resources? How many people are in operations? Excellent. What about clinicians? Awesome. Is there anybody that I may have left out? Accounting. Wow. Hey, that's cool. I appreciate you coming and coming and visiting us today. Hopefully this is something that'll help you. Do you supervise people? Awesome. How many people report to you? Awesome. I'm sorry? Perfect. All right. So, first thing I was going to ask you guys, do you know what your average staff tenure is? Who knows?
18 months.
Anybody want to raise their hand and throw out a number?
10 years.
10 years is the average time that an employee stays at your organization. What's your name?
Sally.
Susie? Susie, I'm gonna call on you a bunch because average. And I'm sorry, you in the back. How many? What is the average length of tenure for your staff?
About 18 months, 24 months.
That's average. That's about average of what we see industry-wide, right?
Just claim that and say I work for the government, so our job's you get in, you're in.
Okay, so there are exceptions to every rule, and this is definitely one of them. But you know, it's really important to be aware of what your staff's tenure is, and if you understand, everything is about data and information, and if you understand what the information is telling you, and you know what to look at, you always have the ability to make improvements. So I want to give you again some bullet points to track, but also some things that are also going to be helpful. So what you have here is from a pro forma that we took from one of the organizations we work with. And what you can see is that payroll-related expenses are 75% of your operating costs. Huge. Not to mention, when there's when somebody leaves, when there's turnover, there's disruption everywhere. Whether it's pulling information or time from leadership, from management, from tenured staff, or disruptions in all kinds of things. Not to mention, what are we all here for? Taking care of clients, right? So what ends up happening is it becomes a huge distraction in addition to the financial problems. And what ends up happening too, and I'm coming from a compliance company, right? So we deal with compliance, and we see how much it affects your regulatory information, because people don't know your processes, right, and how you're doing things. So it's really important that we focus on our staff, and we focus on the people that we have working for us. And in order to have the right workforce, it also involves hiring, and a good hiring process, and a good onboarding process, and also a good communication process with your staff. So what I want to do is tell you why I'm here and what qualifies me to be here. So I'm the CEO and co-founder of Hatch Compliance. We're first mover in this industry, and what we've noticed is as much schooling as people have to get through in order to be in this industry, the level of creating your own documentation tends to be very challenging for staff. And it's really important that is considered here. So Hatch Compliance, been in the behavioral healthcare field only about 5 years, so I'm a baby here. I really am. And what that does, though, is it gives me 20 plus years of business experience in many other fields to be able to pull from. Because when you're pulling from the same echo chamber and the same group of people over and over again, nobody really thinks outside the box because we're so busy doing what we've always done. So it's important to mention that my entire life has been building and creating businesses. I'm the guy that they call the fixer. You know, something's not working, what do we do? So because of that, I've managed to live in a lot of different places and deal with a lot of different people, and that's where I gathered the information to be able to present to you guys today. I'm a lifelong athlete, former national champion cyclist, and super competitive. I need to figure every little piece out in order to be able to move forward, and that's also kind of ADHD, but that's another topic. I also have a skill for recognizing where there's deficiency. Where can things be improved? And I have a good way of kind of stepping back from the forest, or stepping back from the screen and what's happening, and looking at the big picture and the whole picture of everything. I'm also real passionate about personal growth and my health. And what I like to do is share that information with people, and you're gonna catch a bit of that today. Started my career as a headhunter and worked as a headhunter in many different fields. Started up many different verticals, from software to pharmacy to banking to you name it. So I have over hundreds and hundreds of interviews, hiring processes, exit interviews, and information to pull from. And the other thing is I have a thing for quotes, and you're gonna catch that quite a bit today. So it's something that I'd like to share with people, and it's a good way to remember things. Any of you guys ever heard of Brian Tracy? So Brian Tracy is a sales trainer, and this is a really important quote, because if you can get your staff thinking in terms of what kind of company would my company be if everyone in the company was just like me, you will have a team that looks out for each other, that helps each other, and they will feel rewarded and appreciated. So this is a really good thing. In fact, in your regular everyday lives, you can break this down in a lot of other ways, you know, and this is kind of like a step back from presentation on staff retention, but if we think, what kind of world would this world be if everyone in the world was just like me? It creates an attitude of we're all in this together. It's kind of like that golden rule, right? If we treat people the way we want to be treated, it all comes back. So this is a really valuable expression, and I try to live by that. I try to teach people to live by that. Does anybody know what KPIs are? Who doesn't know what a KPI is? Anybody? So a KPI is basically objective data. It's a key performance indicator, and it's very important to be tracking your KPIs. KPI is anything really that can be measured and quantifiable. You guys are all familiar with value-based care. I imagine you've heard the expression a few times, maybe? Anybody not familiar with what value-based care is? Awesome. As we start transitioning into a value-based care compensation model, we're going to be seeing KPIs and data very regularly. And if you're not tracking everything that you're doing to get your outcomes, you're going to fail at a value-based care model. Because in value-based care, so many people are just looking at an outcome. Think about it like when you were in high school and you were in math class, right? And the teacher says, solve this problem. and all you did was show them your outcome, what would they tell you? Show me your work. What did you do to get the outcome? Because really, if you don't know what you're putting in, you don't know what the recipe is, you can't modify it to fix or adjust the outcomes. And staffing is the same thing. If you're not tracking everything you're doing through the recruiting process, interview process, application, onboarding, hiring, throughout their performance reviews and exit interviews. Are any of you not doing exit interviews when people leave? I know. Hold on. What's so funny?
It was awful.
What was your exit interview?
Yes, it was awful.
What happened?
They told me how much they loved our company, and that wasn't what I was wanting to hear. I wanted to hear like what we could have done to keep them, and I didn't get an answer.
So what kind of questions do you ask?
I asked questions like, what was the most challenging part of your position? What was the part that you enjoyed the most? Were you satisfied with the medical, dental, life insurance package? And all of the answers were yes. It was great.
So that's really interesting because a lot of times people don't want to talk about that, right? They don't want to talk about why they're leaving. So what you can do in that kind of situation, and I'm going to get into it a little bit further along, but it's not about what they tell you as much as what they don't tell you, right? And a lot of times you're going to see things along the way, and I'm going to talk about that a bit more. But again, exit interviews, there's data there, there's information there. You want to be looking at that. And just about everything should be tracked. And who is tracking things like performance reviews, competency assessments, and different metrics along the way of people's employees? How are you tracking that now? Anybody want to answer that? So you're doing quarterly assessments. What kind of, what percentage of response do you usually get?
So I get over
80%. So I know you, and I know your organization, and you guys are really switched on. That's a very high number for staff engagement. And I'm going to talk a little bit. I believe it's on the next couple slides about why people leave, because that's also important to know. And so.
Can I clarify something?
Yeah, go for it.
I think they were afraid to get a bad reference. So I think like they didn't want to tell me, or maybe I'm scary. But but I was trying to convince them like, this isn't going to impact, like you've had a good record with us. I want to understand why you're leaving. And they gave me nothing, but that also had data. Because why are they giving me nothing? And so I started looking at my other staff and they're like, no, it's great, we love this place. And I'm like, come on, like give me something to work on.
So I got a couple questions for you then. How long was that person at the company?
6 months.
6 months. What is your role in the organization?
I'm the owner and president.
How many times in that 6 months have you spent, how much time have you spent connecting with them in the last 6 months before they left?
Not enough.
Any of you guys have kids? My grandmother used to have an expression, and she said, if you want a lot from your kids, you want to demand a lot from your kids, you need to give a lot. And you need to give a lot in advance. Fill up that emotional bank account ahead of time. Because what happens is, if you're not engaging with them on a regular basis, 6 months later, if they do decide to leave, they're not going to feel comfortable or safe having that conversation with you, right? And there's a lot going on right now. We had a meeting with the Joint Commission in October at the Joint Commission headquarters, and they're doing a really big initiative this year on 2 different areas in this kind of space. One of them is workplace safety, really important. Healthcare in general has the least safe work environment of any industry. Put it in behavioral health, when you're dealing with your clients clientele who, let's face it, they're in a shitty place in their lives, or they're not going to be going for treatment, right? So we need to be looking out for our staff, especially in those situations, and we need to show them that they're safe, not only from clients, but also in a safe work environment. And I've got some things to talk about in terms of making your people feel comfortable and safe. The reason I was asking about what data you're collecting on and how you're collecting data on your tenure and your staff retention. Has anybody heard the expression GIGO? G-I-G-O? What does GIGO stand for?
Garbage in, garbage out.
Garbage in, garbage out. You put crap data in, it's useless. You're wasting your time. Use it. Use it. There's so much, and you're going to hear me say this a lot. This is a requirement for a reason, right? And if you take something that's required and you do it just to check a box, you're wasting your time, right? Use it. So I hear people all the time, we talk about competency assessments. Now, competency assessments are required. But if you're tracking competency assessments on paper and you have no way of aggregating that data effectively to know where your staff is strong and where they're deficient, you are wasting your time and you're not providing the tools that your staff needs. So, perfect example, mention competency assessments. Also mention, everything needs to be tracked consistently and in a repeatable manner, systematically. Because if you can look at things consistently, it's kind of funny. I walk around these conferences and I go to probably every one. And I walk around to every booth. Hold on, before I say this, hold on. Whose organization is data-driven? Raise your hand. 2, 3, there's 3 data-driven. Anybody else? Nobody else says they're data-driven? How about evidence-based? Cool. Problem is, I can talk to somebody else I can talk to you and ask you what data you're looking at, how often you're collecting the data, when you're collecting the data, why you're collecting the data, so on and so forth, how you're looking at it, and then how you're using that data to improve performance. And guess what? Most of the time, you're going to hear different answers from different people in your organization. And that's because the CEO says, we're data-driven. We need to tell you that we're data-driven. But the problem is consistency is everything. Otherwise, again, it's useless. So if you want good data, you need to take it very seriously. You need to report on it very regularly. You need to encourage your staff to be reporting. And the way you do that is regular communication, setting clear expectations, reward people who are reporting and speaking and sharing information, take action on the information they give you. Any of you guys seen the show Ted Lasso?
Yes.
So you remember the first episode or two where he shows up and he has this suggestion box? And everybody's like, piss off, nobody wants to hear what his suggestion is, to give them suggestions. That's because people don't usually take action on suggestions. And it's something else that you're requiring your people to do. For those of you who haven't seen the show, everybody's suggestions in the box were telling him to go take a walk. Nobody respected him. It was a bunch of jokes. One person made a comment that the showers weren't working well. And he fixed the shower the next day. And when they got in there and they saw that he took action, they were much more willing to respect him, listen to him, engage with him, and communicate. Because what they're requesting and their voice is being heard. You need to make people feel heard and take action. Otherwise, you're not going to get data, and you're not going to have anything to work with. Then you're just kind of shooting in the dark and going, what next? So, really important. I want to talk here about the topics that I'm going to be bringing up today. First, why do people leave? I think that I hear stories all the time about why people leave. In fact, I was at an engagement in Dallas, and we were talking on a subject somewhat similar to this. And the CEO of another facility, of one of the facilities, stands up and he says, "We're having a real problem with staff. I can't keep clinicians because the treatment center down the road from me is paying clinicians $3 an hour more, and I can't keep people." I said, "What's the name of the treatment center right down the road?" And he says the name. I said, "I would be willing to bet you there is no way that they are leaving for $3 an hour." And told me the name of the treatment center down the road. Turns out somebody from that center was at that conference. I said, "Do you know what the average tenure is at your treatment center?" She says, "People don't leave. I don't even know. We've got people here 10, 15 years as clinicians." And I looked at the guy and said, "Your problem is not the $2 an hour. Your problem is there's a treatment center down the street that knows how to treat their employees." I want to also talk with you about how to manage, how to collect data, how to get good data, and how to use it in a way that's going to be valuable for you to be able to retain your staff and to be able to have your staff happy, but also engaged with your clients. We also want to talk about an effective hiring process, effective onboarding, and effective communication. Plan for advancement. What's a cultural fit? It's also really important, and how to communicate with your team. Who here, I got a prize if somebody can get this right. What's the top reason people leave their organization? Bad management? Is there any specific aspect? I mean, that's kind of general. Anything specific? No, communication. You want to add anything on the bad management piece?
They don't feel valued?
Management not communicating. All right. And how about you?
I would guess that there would be less room for growth within the company.
Mm-hmm. That's very high. Very high. Not feeling valued. That's the number one. I got a Starbucks card for you. People do not feel valued. If you don't feel valued, you are not going to be adding value. It's that simple. So, these are the top reasons. This was taken from a study from LinkedIn very recently. And these are some things to consider. Everything that I'm going to be talking about is in relation to getting your staff to feel appreciated, getting your staff to feel heard, getting your staff to feel acknowledged, okay? This is key. Looking for advancement opportunities, huge. Nobody signs up in whatever position they're in without an idea of what they want to do next, right? Dissatisfied with leadership and management, right? That happens a lot of the times too. And one of the things I hear from a lot of people is they don't listen to me. I'm the one dealing with the clients. I'm the one who's face to face with the reason that they're even here. And they're not giving me feedback, they're not giving me tools, and it's creating discontent. Work culture and environment. I'm going to talk a bit about vicarious trauma, operational trauma, or organizational trauma. You know, we talk about trauma informed because, you know, that's how we treat our clients. How about our staff? This industry is really unique. in the fact that many of our employees and our teammates have been through the same struggles as our clients. And we need to respect that. A lot of times people are looking for more of a challenge. It's very easy to get bored. You know, you're doing the same thing all day, every day. People want to be challenged. Better compensation. Yeah, I mean, that's not usually a reason why people leave. More recognition or appreciation. That's a big one. You guys have any idea what's not on this list? And anything that you guys are doing, what are some of the reasons that you guys have heard of why people are leaving from your organization? Burnout, that's a big one. Here.
Oh, I was just saying that a lot of what I'm hearing at my job and why people leaving is disrespect, not being heard, you know, and you don't have a voice so many times. You're just kind of able to do the surface, and then when you're trying to get in or give a suggestion, like you're saying, or how we can do things better, just not being heard.
Yeah. Look, nobody. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you?
Yeah, I was gonna say work-life balance.
For sure, work-life balance. How many of you guys have to take an on-call phone? Right? It's kind of funny. We just brought somebody new, two new people onto our consulting team, and we do a weekly gratitude meeting, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in the communication section. And in our gratitude meeting, I hear from both of them on a very regular basis, I get my weekends. I don't get a call at 2 o'clock in the morning, you know, that something is going on, right? Work-life balance is huge, and respecting some boundaries along those lines goes a very, very long way. Because we have a consulting practice, we get called into organizations all the time. People looking to turn things around. We've got problems, we need to fix them, we need to turn things around. And I'll say to them, well, what are you doing for staff engagement? They go, well, we have pizza parties once a quarter. Great! Who gives a shit about a pizza party? I mean, sorry, I don't know if I'm not allowed to curse. I mean, I don't know if that's a problem or not, but frankly, who gives a shit about pizza party? And you're dealing with life and death and very serious situations all the time. And if that's the only way that you're showing your appreciation to your team, we've got a problem. Who represents you? We're here to take care of clients, right? That's what our treatment centers do. But if you take care of your people, they will perform and take care of your clients. That is the key. Focus on your team, treat your people well, they will treat your clients well, and you will have much better results. And very often, I hear about disconnection. You know, everybody in this room probably heard the expression, the opposite of addiction is connection. We need to connect for our own well-being, as well as for our staff's well-being, as well as for our clients' well-being. It's imperative. We are here to provide a very, very valuable service for people who really need it. I want to talk about managing systems. Because if you're doing one-offs for people, and I got a little story about a one-off that bit me in the butt very recently. I could present on this all day, but hey, we all know following our own advice sometimes is a problem. And you know, focusing on systems, consistent systems does a lot to prevent issues around favoritism, around resentment, around things being different for this person in comparison. So everything should be consistent and it should be managed through a system. Set clear expectations. Any of you guys heard of Brene Brown? Clear's kind, right? Clear is kind. If you know what is expected of you, then you know what to do. And if you don't know what is expected of you, well then it's hit or miss, right? Create repeatable standard processes, always, right? Again, these one-offs, they don't give you any real data to rely on and to look back on as you're evaluating your performance or an employee's performance. And then what do you have? Gotta go. You want to track and you want to measure everything. And if it's inconvenient to measure and to track, find another system. That's exactly why we created our software, by the way, because compliance, which, how many of you enjoy doing joint commission and state documentation? Raise your hand if you enjoy it. Raise your hand if you think it stops you from doing the job that you want to be doing or you're supposed to be doing, right? Gets in the way. You know why? Because you need a system that makes your information usable. Again, it comes back to like we were talking about just a few minutes ago. If you're not tracking data in a way that you can use it, and a way that you can measure it for quality improvement and for performance improvement, it's a waste of time. Don't waste your time. Use your information, collect it. Keep it simple. Keep it simple. When you start, when you have processes that are not standardized, systems that are not standardized, documentation that's not standardized, you have people that come from you hire somebody new, coming from another organization, they don't know what you're doing. You got a one-off system of whatever it is. That's why when people talk to me, people hire us all the time to modify their electronic health records so that it meets state or joint commission accrediting standards. Because what happens is, and I don't know if any of you are in a position of purchasing an EMR or have been involved in that purchase decision, but everybody's talking about customization and one-offs. Well, there's a problem when you one-off systems. You hurt people's ability to onboard and adopt your system effectively because they're learning something different from the last place, is learning something different from the place before, and so on and so forth. Adoption becomes a problem. You also want to create good policies. Policies are really important because if you want to create a system that works, policies are imperative. And following your policies are also imperative. The other thing is you can't let anything slip. Again, it goes back to the people who have kids. You let something slip, what's that? It's going to happen again. You're setting a precedent. Exactly. And we all know when we let something slip and we set that precedent one time, somebody's right on their heels to do the exact same thing. So we want to definitely talk about processes. So in your hiring process, does anybody have any questions on anything I've spoken about, asked, any questions so far? I just want to make sure that, you know, if any of you want to embellish on something a little bit more, that we can do that. Everybody's cool? All right. So, your hiring process. Again, you should have a policy around your hiring process. And you need to standardize your hiring process. And it could be different for different roles in your organization, but in general, you want to standardize your hiring process. During the interviews, before they come in, for an interview or speak to you for an interview, you should be able to know the expectations of the person coming in for this interview, what you're expecting this person to do. Now, granted, you talk to somebody who's interviewing for a certain position, but you may detect certain skill sets or certain things that they may be better in down the road. Cool. You can modify a job description, but you do need to have a basic understanding of what your expectations are of this person, and you need to set them very clear during that hiring process. Some people may not like this. Slow to hire, quick to let go. And that's really important. Again, it comes down to not letting things slip. I mentioned I got bit in the butt with this before, but we recently had a hire that during the interview process, it went great. The guy was great, his personality was great, no issues, but I saw on the resume that he, in the last 3 years, 4 years, he hadn't been with a company longer than like 8 months, 9 months. Red flag. Not the kind of red flag you necessarily want to use when, to let somebody go, but you definitely want to take note of this. During references turned out great, we ended up hiring the guy. A couple days into training, and I'm going to talk about this in a little bit more depth in a few minutes. If it's a position that is a high turnover position in your organization, don't hire one, hire two, hire three at the same time. Hedge your bets, because you are most likely going to be replacing that person if you just hire one. If you hire multiple and you train them at the same time, you're gonna protect yourself from that turnover issue, right? So with this employee that we had recently hired, again, red flag from the resume. Now, we're a technology company, we're a software company. And during his training process, the guy couldn't figure out how to set up his Zoom, how to put his email signature in. I'm going, oh crap. Red flag number 2. This is a problem. How are you going to sell technology if you can't figure out how to use, basic tech that most people are using? And during a couple of training calls, just noticed a lack of engagement, and immediately, he was here for 3 weeks. You don't want to be doing that, but at the same time, this industry is very small. If you make a bad hire because we just need somebody in that position, you're going to regret it. Whether it's you spend the time to train them, and you spend the time to get them hired and started and onboarded, and everybody else's time to do that, and then they end up leaving, you're wasting your time, you're wasting your money, and you're putting extra burden on the staff that's there and your tenured staff. Don't settle. You're going to regret it. Now, you may have somebody who you're 80%. All right, cool. 70, 80%, you may want to go on a limb, but not that much, because again, this is a tight industry, and you may end up putting yourself in a position that affects your reputation. So the other thing to consider is hire with the future in mind. Who in the room tries to promote from within? Awesome. Now, when you promote from within, is this something that's discussed during their hiring process? Or is this something that just kind of happens, like a position comes available and you go, oh, this person may be good for that?
During the hiring
How does that usually work in your organizations, or do you talk about it in advance while you're hiring? It's important to do that. You know, again, in a compliance role, I see a lot of things. I see a lot of human resources people that were good BHTs. Hey, you're a good tech, let's put you in an HR role. That is insane. Insane. There is so much risk, so much training, so much liability for human resources. If any of you even consider it, please don't. Please don't. But yeah, you want to be discussing during the interview process ambition. What is your goal? What are your goals? What's your ambition? Where do you want to be? Where do you see yourself down the road? For a couple reasons. One, you could be hiring with the future in mind. Most of our organizations are looking to grow or looking to strengthen in some ways. So having an understanding of where somebody is, where they want to go. Maybe they go, hey, I'm cool being a tech for the rest of my life. Sweet. Well, just be the best tech you can be and we're cool. But you may be talking to somebody who's maybe you want to hire for a case management position, but they're in school to be a therapist. Talk with them about a career path. Build a career path. Talk about the future. It's going to set some subliminal messaging. It's also going to create expectations that you intend to keep them around for a while. And they will respond with those kinds of things. So, I think I may have missed something here. So, one other thing to think about here is looking for red flags during all of these processes. Be real diligent about this because you want to filter as much as you can before somebody's probationary period is over, right? That's when that's when the majority of your investment is into those people. I do want to mention though, when looking at resumes, like I mentioned, I started my career as a headhunter. People put way too much emphasis on resumes. Keep in mind, these people are not resume writers. And some people hire professional resume writers to do this, but for the most part, people are not resume writers. Don't rule somebody out because their resume sucks. You know, look at other factors in it, maybe use it as a red flag, but don't rule somebody out because of their resume. It's pretty short-sighted, and you may be passing up on somebody who could potentially be a very good, very loyal teammate and team member for something that is kind of silly. Be diligent for red flags when setting up interviews. Go ahead.
What would be red flags? I mean, if someone holds a job 6 months at a time and what would you say red flags on resumes would be?
So what I would say would be a red flag on a resume, some things that I would look for. And by the way, what I would also do, I say don't rule it out, but call about during the interview process. You got to filter that, right? So things to look on a resume, tenure is really important. Skill sets to a degree, you know, depends on what the role is. If I'm hiring somebody, again, maybe I'll throw human resources out there where detail is really important in a human resources role. You're seeing typos, bad formatting, documentation problems, those are red flags, right? If you see somebody with a really well put together resume that looks organized, that's cohesive, that may be a little bit unique, those are things that you want to be looking at, you know, and more about the way they can organize their thoughts than the skill set, because a skill can be learned. A personality is what it is, right? So that's what I would say on that. Any other questions? Did that clarify it enough? When you're setting up interviews, this is also really important. When you're setting up interviews, are these people making themselves available? Are they communicative? Do they respond quickly? Do they leave you hanging? I'm sorry? Did they cancel interviews? Did they make excuses? You can have one or two of those. You know, you'll give you a mulligan. Gary, you know, we're good for a little while, but yeah, absolutely. That's a great one. Anybody have anything else, either at looking at resumes or setting up interviews that's a red flag? No. Damn. Oh, man. You know,
Repeat that. Can you repeat that? We can't hear it.
look, it's rare that I get shocked by one of those these days. That's a good one.
They said it was a weekend, and on their weekend times they do weekend things.
If they can control themselves on an interview, I could only imagine what's going to happen when you hire them.
Can you repeat that?
Can you hear that, Becca?
Yes. That's a great one, and
We
it's
didn't
true.
hear what she said in the back.
Oh, she said when somebody tells you who they are, believe them, and it's true. That's a good indicator.
And the drinking beer, they didn't hear that.
We were hiring for a substance abuse therapist, and the person was drinking a beer, and the interview was on the weekend, and they said that it's weekend and they do weekend things on the weekend.
Wow.
Now, can you imagine if they're treating one of your clients on a weekend? we got a group therapy session going on a Saturday. You know, let's bust out the keg. No, that doesn't work. Yeah, I mean, you see, these are things that are so apparent a lot of times, but and it kind of sounds silly, but people do this, and chances are this guy thought he was going to get hired doing that, and may have been hired doing that in the past. During the interviews, can they hold the conversation? Yeah, what he's talking about is weekend and the Jets or whatever, but you know, or whatever football team. But yeah, I mean, you got to be able to hold a conversation. You know, we're in an industry that needs engagement, and we need connection. And when you're talking with somebody, now again, I mean, if they're applying for a job as a maintenance person, maybe it doesn't matter if they're a great verbal communicator. But if you're in front of clients, you need to know that. During the negotiation phase and the offer phase, we had hired somebody about a year and a half ago now, and red flag one was short tenure, but it was hard to find somebody for this position. So, you know, we kept her in the interview process. During the negotiation, she accepted the offer, came back a couple days later and goes, nah, can you do more before I sign it? And I was a little bit shocked, a little surprised, and at the same time, she interviewed really well. It was a very good interview. And I went back to the team and we decided to give her more money. She lasted like 4 months, just like every other position. She was showing us during the negotiation, she was showing us who she was, as you had just said. I'm sorry, what was your name?
Shamrock.
Shamra, it's nice to meet you. She was showing us who she was. And we hired her anyway, she didn't last. The point is be hyper vigilant for red flags. They're red flags for a reason. And have a certain amount in your head where you go, all right, this is reasonable, this is too much. And how important is it to have a warm body in whatever this is? Because there is a reason why people have very short tenure. And I tend to think, so I'm an empath, right? And I look at people and I go, man, if I was in that guy's position, I would be saying, shit, I need to find a place to stay for a really long time. And I need some stability in my life. That's what I would say. That's what goes through my head when I'm talking to somebody who's been there for 3 months or 6 months at their other places. I'm thinking they have to do that. You guys don't have to be the one to prove that wrong. You don't have to be the one to prove that wrong, because it most likely you're not going to be the one to break that cycle. I hate to break it to you, it doesn't usually work that way. Between acceptance and start date, again, stuff happens. You're sending them onboarding documentation, paperwork. You're sending them setting training dates. You're connecting them with people on your team, with your staff. And they go dark for a couple days. No responses. Well, to me, that's a red flag. Because I'm going, oh, what changed? Again, my headhunter mindset goes, oh, they're interviewing somewhere else, right? But regardless of what it is, it should definitely be considered a red flag in that situation. During training, are they not getting along with the person who's training them? Are they asking questions that you just answered? Are they showing up late? There are so many things that you can look at, and again, if you're really vigilant about these things, you're going to see these issues, and it all comes up, you know, during the hiring and during their probationary period, and you'll see a lot. Go ahead.
I would say too, when you're setting up the
Oh, hold on one second.
Oh, sorry. I can try to project.
All right, no, you can't
Okay,
project that.
Okay. I would say too, when you're setting up the interview, have very thoughtful, intentional questions
Yes.
ready to go, and really listen to what they're saying and have them talking more, so you can drill down on specific things and see their behaviors through the questions.
Absolutely, absolutely. Look, you know, we were given 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. If you want to engage and relate to people, get them talking. People love to talk about themselves, by the way. It's kind of funny. During interviews, very often, what I like to do is ask some open-ended questions and let them go. Just sit back, shut up. They'll either sell themselves or they'll sell you on not hiring them. Real quick. But yes, let them go. It's funny. So I had heard it was a TED Talk, and they were talking about dating, and they were saying how the person who did all the talking on the date walks away from the date thinking it went really well. Kind of funny, right? And the other person most likely was either saying, now again, I'm all about attachment style, right? So I look at this, and there's different ways to look at it depending on who the person is. But if you're doing all the talking and the other person's not saying much, either one, they're more comfortable not talking, or you are stepping on this other person. Either way, again, you're showing who you are. And again, during the probationary period, oh, go ahead.
I just wanted to share that something I like to do to
Oh,
start.
hold on.
Sure.
Doo-doo-doo.
Thank you. I wanted to share that something that I like to do to sort of see how this person thinks, what they're like, what their thought processes are like, is to ask a sort of unexpected question during an interview. So sometimes I'll ask, if you had a personality disorder, which one would you have? Sometimes I'll ask, if you could get rid of one number, what number do you pick? So just like kind of odd, random questions like that kind of really breaks the rhythm of the interview.
Sure.
It forces that person to sort of take off that mask and really think about something completely different. Can show a lot. That's all.
If you were a disorder, what would you be?
I've been asked this question before, and that's why now we use it in interviews, and my answer was borderline.
Okay, why?
Based on what I was like in my teenage years, I was not, I struggled. I will put it that way. Yeah, sure. But when I was asked that question, then it led to a conversation, like disclosing certain minimal things about myself and kind of like my history. and it gave me an opportunity to like think through, you know, what are the traits for borderline and how does that relate to me, and also like making sure that, hey, I'm not saying I have borderline personality disorder, right? But I'm just saying if I have to choose one, this is the one, right?
Sure.
And at the end of that interview, I really liked that I was asked that question, and that's why I use it now.
Yeah. Well, look, anything you can say to make people think, right? We are so robotic in our day, in so many of the things that we do, that if we can just think a little bit and do something different, then it really opens up our experience. And I think that's great. I love that. And I gotta say, like, you guys are awesome. I was nervous coming in to do this today, and just you guys are awesome. I love the engagement, and I really appreciate all of you guys. I just wanted to like step back and say that because this is a really good room, and I really appreciate you guys.
Do you need to schedule any services?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I was just going to add one thing that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Hold on.
No, that's okay. It's not that profound.
Oh no, I want everybody here.
Yeah, I've noticed when people ask a lot about work-life balance, that goes a little beyond. Like, do I always have to be there at 8? And their level of commitment certainly shines through.
Absolutely.
And so that's been a red flag that has bit me.
Yes, absolutely. Well, you know, it's kind of funny. I had an interesting conversation. I had a job interview once. And the human resources person I was interviewing with, she goes, you know, this is not a 9-to-5 job. Now, my whole career, again, has been really results oriented. You know, my responsibilities have been results driven. And because of that, hourly means nothing. You know, there's no amount of hours. It takes the amount of hours it takes to get the job done. And I remember talking with a human resources person at this company, and she goes, this is not a 9-to-5 job. You know, you may have to work like 12 or 13-hour days. And I go, that's awesome. And she goes, why? I go, that's like half of what I'm doing right now. I'm totally cool with that. And it's kind of funny, you know, it's a similar kind of, similar kind of thing, right? You know, trying to shake things up a little bit, and shaking it up is important. Another interesting thing that I heard in an interview once was a sales manager said to me, tell me about your biggest failure. Tell me about your biggest failure. And it's kind of funny because I was an underdog. I was far underqualified for this job. And I was young, and he was older, and I was intimidated. But he said, you know, what's your biggest failure? I go, what do you mean? He goes, well, tell me something that you failed at. And I sat down, caught my breath for a second, and I go, you know what? I've never failed at anything. Because everything that I've done has built me up to be where I am now. So failure's when you stop. Failure's when you stop trying to push. Failure's when you stop trying to excel and grow and develop and be the best you that you can be. So, sorry, it kind of made me think about that a little bit. It's a little, little story that happened in my life, but it's true. And there really is no failure, unless you stop, unless you quit. Now you can pivot. You can see something's not working, and you can pivot. That's not failing. That's evolving, and that's different. So talking about data in your interview and in your interviewing and your hiring and your onboarding process, you want to be looking at how can I collect information on this, and how can I make the information usable so that I can improve my hiring processes, make them more efficient, hire better people, and that's the beginning of the process. So you want to be looking at how are we reviewing, storing, and responding to applicants. Do we have a standard time frame that we're responding to applicants? Do we have a standard way that we respond to applicants? This is our way of showing them we're a professional and you want to work here. And it starts with resume, application, all those processes. You also want to have a standard process around viewing resumes, because at least having 2 people look at them if there's anything in question, because people see different things and everybody's got their own perception of what they're seeing. Having consistent processes around that's really helpful. Same thing about interviewing processes. You know, standardize it. It should be standardized. Now, granted, you can change things here and there, but have your set of standard questions. Just like he was saying over there. I'm sorry, I didn't get your name about the, yes?
Santiago.
Santiago. Just like he's saying, have some standard questions that you ask that you can gauge people's responses. Of course, onboarding. Have a standard system of onboarding. Get your people brought up to speed the same way over and over again. And what happens is you'll start to notice efficiencies and inefficiencies, right? When you see those things, then you can make changes. Again, we're a software company, and we're making some big changes right now to our onboarding process and to the way that we bring new people on to our software. And it's funny, I'm primarily in charge of creating these new processes. And I'm sitting at my desk and I'm like, oh, this is great. This is going to be so cool. This is going to be so helpful and makes things so much easier for people. And then I go to my first meeting, first implementation meeting, trying to show the new onboarding golden whatever process, and it's like you were walking into a brick wall. And then you can modify it, right? You have a standard, a benchmark to start with, and then you can modify it. But you have to start somewhere, and if you're not tracking it, and if you're not doing things consistently, you've got nothing to go from and nothing to look to improve. I like to record it reviews. I think that if you record it and you play it back, you're gonna hear things more from my own knowledge. You know, oh, that was stupid. Why did I say that? Why did I ask that? Or, hey, that was a really good question, or they had a really good answer. Or, you know, again, benchmark. Everything should be. Have an employee handbook. But give a little quiz on the employee handbook. Make sure they read it. Because so much of what they do should be in that handbook. It's really important. One of the things that we do in our software is we put people's employee handbooks in our learning management system, and we assign a quiz to it, so that people can prove that they understand the handbook. Because this is like, I mean, next to your policies, this is kind of like your Bible of what your expectations are and what they should expect of you. Again, clear as time. It all comes down to being clear, transparent, communicative. So, funny story, in our employee handbook, we had, my partner, Renee, she wanted to do some interesting holidays last year. So instead of the standard like Labor Day and Memorial Day and all of that, we had like Juneteenth, and there were a couple of different holidays that we had in there. Now she was trying to be fun and innovative and do things that would make people happy. Unfortunately, you know, people have kids and lives and expectations for days off, and that didn't quite work that way. But what was kind of funny was it was in the employee handbook, but nobody read it. So they're like, and Christmas falls on a Saturday, but what day do we have off? But it was all lined up in the handbook. Point is people aren't reading it. Do some things to engage them, to make sure that they're reading it. It's not a waste of time. If you're not cookie cuttering every other treatment center's handbook, which happens, Just like people do with policies. I got news for you. People ask us all the time, can you just give us some cookie cutter policies? No, that's not how it works, right? Same thing with an employee handbook. It should be your organization, your expectations, and what they should expect from you. 15-day reviews. Who does a 15-day review? Ever think about a 15-day review? You know why you do a 15-day review? See what is going on with their personality. Are they a cultural fit? That stuff gets weeded out within the first few days of training. Is this person a fit for our corporate culture? Because I'll tell you what, you could be the best at whatever it is in the world. If you are not a fit culturally, you will not last. It doesn't work. 30-day reviews are a little bit more formal. Most people are doing a 30-day review. If you're not doing a 30-day review, you should be. Use that. Take those 30-day reviews for, are they getting it? Do they get it? Because if they're not getting it, or you're not comfortable with where they're getting it, you guys need to have a serious conversation. Another thing that's really helpful to do, and I talk about quantifying. Quantify what you can. So with your 30-day reviews, 15-day reviews, and I've got some data to track to talk about it, but score what you can. You got David Whitesock in the back, and Steve from the Recovery Capital Index. And we talk about this all the time. Quantify it. If it can be measured, it can be improved. So if you're looking at only qualitative data, or you're not looking at your data at all, you've got issues. So score it. And what I mean is, assign a value, 1 through 5, but you can't use 3. Everybody wants to use 3. And 3 is useless, because it's mid-road and it's a non-committal answer. So track it, score it. 90 days, performance review. At the end of your probationary period, try to do performance reviews quarterly. It's going to help with communication. It's going to help people to feel heard. It's going to be able to give you good information on what's going on and what's going on with them. I think we talked about it a little bit earlier about exit interviews. You guys doing exit interviews? Who's not? Is there a reason why you don't do exit interviews? You know, one of the things you find when you do an exit interview is, are there issues with our management, right? Are there issues? We saw reasons people leave, right? Corporate culture being a very high reason, leadership or management. And in those exit interviews, the example she gave a little bit earlier about people not wanting to talk is not that common. People usually want to unload during those exit interviews. Take it, use it. Go ahead.
Can you share some of your exit interview questions?
Absolutely. And just off the top of my head, I think when you go through exit interviews, you want to talk about things like engagement, communication, talk about safety, right? Safety is so important, especially in this field. We get calls or see incident reports of staff being abused by the clients. It happens so often. We see African American clients or staff getting abused by white clients. It makes them feel uncomfortable. We see LGBTQ staff members getting mistreated by their clients. If they don't feel comfortable sharing that information when it happens, they bottle it up, they remember it, you always remember it. I don't know if any of you guys have ever been discriminated against. I have. And you remember that. These are things you want to be looking at. By the way, just a side note, this year, Joint Commission, starting in January, it has a requirement around diversity and healthcare equity. And part of this requirement is that you have a policy around equity and diversity, and that you're tracking data on that policy, and that you're executing on the data that you have. That started in January. So if you guys are not aware of that, or if you've never heard that before, talk to me after, but Joint Commission is requiring it. They're also requiring workplace safety. Go ahead.
Who do you think is best positioned to do the exit interview?
Go ahead.
Who do you think it's most appropriate to have do the exit interview?
I think that's a really good question. I guess it's going to depend. A lot of times human resources feels like a safe person for people to talk to. HR is kind of like that safe place, and a lot of times you will get that. But again, as we talked about earlier, if HR is not regularly engaging with this person, they're not going to feel comfortable. But I would probably say what you want to do is be aware of who spends time with people, who they spend time with, who they're close with at the organization. Are they close with their supervisor? Are they close with their operations director? Are they close with the clinical director? We have a real unique, oh, go ahead.
It's a little late to be asking the question at the exit interview.
Which question?
Why they're leaving, what went wrong. Well, we should have known that way.
I agree with you. I agree with you completely. This comes down to consistent communication and understanding. You have to be introspective.
What makes you think you're going to trust you enough to let them know?
Well, that's part of the problem. That's part of the problem is that if that equity is not there, and you haven't built up that rapport, you're going to get squat in that exit interview, and it's going to be useless. And then you're going to repeat the same thing with the next person and the next person and the next person, and you're just going to continue to cycle it. So I would say actually the kind of a point to that is if you notice consistently, and hopefully not consistently because we don't want to be doing exit interviews all the time, but if you notice consistently that people don't want to talk with you, you need to reevaluate your communication with your staff because this is something that can be resolved, but no data is still telling a story.
Well, and they would have probably tried to communicate that and weren't heard.
Oftentimes we get defensive. I'm sorry. Hold on. Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm a loud mouth. I probably don't even need the microphone, but oftentimes we are not introspective in what we're doing, and we're reactive. And we have to kind of step back and to be able to look at what is somebody telling us, right? And when somebody tries to tell us that something is wrong, you guys ever have a conversation with your spouse and they try to tell you something's wrong and you get defensive and you didn't hear anything that they just said because you were too busy trying to defend what just happened or what you did? I've been there. Sorry. That's how it goes, right? We're not listening very often, and again, it comes down to being able to be introspective. And I've talked a little bit about collection of data and using it, but it is really important that you have an understanding of, am I being defensive? Because I've let people go before and try to do an exit interview and they're like, this place sucks and this and that. I'm going, how do you not get defensive? But at the same time, you got to be able to pull information and try to engage them, you know, in hey, look, I don't want, I mean, sometimes, hey, I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry your experience here was this. You'd be amazing. You'd be amazed at what taking accountability does. I'm really sorry. Look, is there anything I could do to make it right? Again, this is a small industry, very small industry. If your people feel wronged, you know what I mean? Give them the floor to share that with you.
So to add to, that's way louder than I thought it was
I
going to be.
know, that's because the speaker is.
So to add to the exit interviews, kind of in the culture of the keyboard warriors, have we seen people being more honest and giving better feedback when it's not a one-to-one interview in person, if it's like via survey? Have we seen higher feedback? Have you seen that in your work?
People are always willing to talk more when they don't have to, when they feel that they don't have to face a consequence, you know? But at the same time, a survey is static. So you ask them a question, they answer the question, and then it's done, right? Our job is to communicate, right? And to engage them in conversation. Engage them. Like, usually what I found is when people are at the point where they're ready to leave, they don't give a shit what you think. You know what I mean? And they're like, yeah, I'll tell you. And they'll, you know, pull up a scroll of all the grievances they have, you know, and all that. And again, one of the things that we do is we have on our software, we have a QR code for grievances and a link for grievances, and we in outpatient centers or in centers where people have access to their technology, to their phones, we tell them to take the QR code and put it on the wall. You know, you have to post where people can file a grievance. If you're filing a grievance report on paper, it's useless, because who gets it once it happens on paper? Is there a workflow around it? Probably not. You know, are you looking at a root cause of your grievances? Data will tell you that story. You know, but I would say if somebody doesn't want to engage in a conversation with you in an exit interview, then you tell them, hey, look, would it be more comfortable for you if I send you something electronically? I would say that would probably be the way I would do it. But that was another good question.
I would just say in response to the gentleman up front, stay interviews, right? So every 90 days you're asking those questions you would be asking at your exit interview. What would make you leave? What can I do to support you more? What's part of your job that you just love doing and you're not able to do as much? What are, you know, so sometimes documentation gets in the way. Great, we can focus on improving documentation so you can meet the patients more.
Absolutely. What's your name? Darcy. Darcy, you get a prize. I like your questions and I like the way you think, and I think it's really it's adding a lot to the conversation and to the meeting, and I really appreciate that. So, I have a Starbucks card for you. So, I'm going to kind of shift a little bit as to data that you want to be tracking during these processes. You know, look at your turnover rate per supervisor. Who's doing that? Are you human resources? Yeah, it's really important. I like to look at AMA rate per case manager and primary therapist as well. It's a little not necessarily necessary for this conversation, but you're going to find some commonalities with that too. Average tenure, of course. What's our average tenure? And how can we improve that? We want to look at the sources that we're getting our candidates from. And how many people are coming from these sources? What sources are providing me the best candidates? What departments am I hiring the most for? What's the tenure of the people that come from these sources. Now, if you've got a good CRM or applicant tracking system, you can do all of this. And what's our cost per hire? Again, you want to be tracking data on where people are struggling, where people are doing well. And again, it's just going to give you good information that you're going to be able to use to improve your processes and to create standard processes. So it's kind of funny. It's 12:10. Wow, I cannot believe how fast this is going. I'm going to hurry up a little bit because I got a lot more to go. I mean, again, this is just some good information to track. We have the attachment in the app here. That this is more like bullets for the presentation, but the attachment in the handout is going to have a little bit more information on there. But some data to track during your onboarding process is also really helpful. Now, I told you guys I like quotes. You guys ever heard of Zig Ziglar? The only thing worse than training employees and losing them is to not train them and keep them. That is no joke. If you don't invest in your people, you are going to regret it. So, you want to really, you want to invest in your people, and you want to invest in their training. If somebody says, one of our programmers comes to me and say, I want to learn about artificial intelligence, or I want to learn about this or that. Go, man, go. Encourage your people to want to improve their skills. They're just going to add more value to your organization. So, with that said, plan for advancement. We talked a little bit about planning for advancement for your people. And yes, you want to do that during the interview process. And outline it in writing for them. It really does wonders because they have goals and things that they can look forward to. That's really important. On that same topic, though, you have to be true to your word. Because if you tell them that you're going to do something and you don't do it, every single time you see them, there's going to be this weird elephant in the room. And it's just going to, it's not going to be a happy place for them. So you want to communicate with them. And a lot of this comes down to communication, but you want to communicate with them. You want to start building towards that promotion early. Show them that you're working towards that process and that progress, right? So you have a case manager who's studying to be a therapist. Get him sitting in on group sessions. Get him ramping towards their goals. Show them steps to improve that you're investing in them. When you invest in your people, they really respond. Keep skill sets in line. Like I mentioned, do not take a tech and put them in human resources. Keep skill sets in line. So maybe you have a tech that's doing a really good job and they're good with people. So maybe you want to put them in a biz dev role, right? Or get them in an outreach role or something along alumni. But try to understand where people's skills are. And if you are going to transfer somebody to another role in the organization, and it's not what you guys originally discussed, ask them before getting into a conversation like, hey, good news, we're going to promote you. Because a lot of times they're not going to have the desire or the ability or the strength to tell you, this isn't really something I'm interested in. And then they're put in a position that they're not comfortable and you're setting yourself up for another problem. So, speak with them before you offer them if it's something else. And if it's not something that they're interested in, don't hold it against them. Retaliation it's real. It happens, and it's definitely not the kind of thing that is going to make a staff member feel appreciated, comfortable. In fact, it does the opposite. Even though you're trying to promote them and maybe trying to give them another opportunity, if it's not something they're interested in, then it may create more problems for you. In terms of data to track here, we want to look at what roles are getting promoted most often, which promotions are successful, and which ones aren't. Which supervisors are promoting the most people, and which positions do you promote most often, and the time that somebody is spending in their position before they are promoted. Next, we're going to get into cultural fit. Cultural fit is everything. You can be the best whatever. If you're not a cultural fit, it is not going to work out. One of the things I like to do during the interview process is check the social media of the person that you're interviewing. That's going to tell you a lot. Social media is wild. You're going to find out the beer drinker on the Saturdays, doing keg stands on their social media, and if that's the person you want doing your representing your organization, right? Things like that. It's really important. And we had a situation not that long ago where we had an employee who was really good. He got the job done, and he was very good at what he did. But he relied heavily on the other members of the team, and he didn't contribute to their emotional bank accounts the same way that they did to his. And when it came to requests from management, he always had a reason to not do something, right? But he was good with our clients. You know what happened? We ended up letting him go. Like, recognize those cultural red flags early as you can, and it'll really help to make sure that you have the right people, because when you have somebody that's not a good cultural fit, they're going to poison the well. And the longer they're around, the more discontent you're going to start seeing in the rest of the organization. By the time we let this guy go, everybody was like, man, why didn't you do this sooner, and this and that, and I'm going, you could have communicated that too, right? Communicate your discontent. But again, it's the same kind of thing. Cultural fit is really important. A bad hire can really create a problem. Go ahead.
So, I also think cultural fit's really important, and one of the things that I've done, I've only been in a leadership position for about a year.
Okay.
So very, very new to it. But something I've done was to tell people, like, hey, if there's ever any issues, honesty is really important. I don't believe in retaliation. I don't believe in like talking badly about coworkers and that kind of thing. But that's where my struggle's at, because I'm basically saying we shouldn't talk badly about each other. This used to be a problem before I became manager.
Mm-hmm.
We shouldn't talk badly about each other. If somebody does, please let me know.
But a lot of the concerns that people were having when they were trying to approach me is, I don't want to talk bad about the person who's talking bad, so I don't know if I should tell you.
Well, there's a difference between a fact and an opinion. And if you're going to say so-and-so this is what's happening, as opposed to this is my interpretation of what's happening, or this is how I feel about what's happening, there's a place for that too. But it's more about sticking to the facts. We are in an industry where we deal with a lot of trauma, right? We've all been traumatized when we spoke up. Everybody has. And that also creates issues, right? Because people are afraid. So consistency is key. And what happens is people feel comfortable when they see consistency out of you as a leader, right? When they see that you don't get bent out of shape when something happens, or when somebody does something, or you respond when you hear something in a productive manner, as opposed to being reactionary, knee-jerk kind of thing. You get a lot more benefit you know, and your people get a lot more benefit. You know, so that's kind of thoughts on that. As far as cultural fit, you also want to make policies. I'm sorry, I'm not used to holding this thing so long. So policies. Have a policy on dress code. Have a policy on electronics, communication, chain of command, repercussions, common issues, and how you're going to address them when those issues happen. Consistent write-ups when a policy is not being followed, and track those write-ups. Because again, it's a system. And if you follow your system and your recipe, you're going to get, at least, you're either going to get consistent results or consistent things that need to be modified.
And adding to the consistency, consistently applied.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And because you can have all the policies in the world, and if people see that you administer them differently, you've already lost them.
Absolutely. It's consistency is so important. So I'm going to try to hurry through the rest of these. I'm shocked that it's gone so fast. So we have things to look for, places to collect data from cultural fit. Look at your patient satisfaction surveys. Compare the patient, if they're not anonymous, that's helpful, but compare your patient satisfaction surveys, staff satisfaction surveys, but don't just do your staff satisfaction surveys in a way that's asking, you know, very simple questions. We do staff satisfaction surveys, and we have them broken up into several different types. Workplace safety, leadership, management, the environment of care, your coworkers, and you have different surveys focusing on different things. It's going to give you good answers, and what we try to recommend as a best practice is once a month, have a different survey for your staff to fill out. Look at your grievance reports. You see a lot of stuff on grievance reports. Incident reports and exit interviews. Here's some information that you can be tracking on the cultural fit as well. Communication. Again, if we want them to trust us, if we want to be trusted, we have to communicate with them. And you can't just communicate when it's an issue to be resolved. The communication has to happen on a regular basis. We do something really cool at my company. Any of you guys know Maeve O'Neill? Yeah? Maeve is awesome. And she is a Dare to Lead Brene Brown trainer, and she's great, and I'd be happy to introduce her to any of you. And we were talking once about gratitude. And she had suggested, you know, that we do gratitude meetings. So I created a gratitude meeting in our company, and every Wednesday morning, started out at 9:30 and it was a half hour. Now it's an hour. The staff is big, and what ends up happening is we do this gratitude meeting. It's funny, my wife is my business partner, and originally I wanted, hey, look, you want to shoot high, right? And my first idea was, let's do a gratitude meeting every day. And she's like, are you freaking kidding me? No, let's not do that. But we figured out a healthy way to do it is once a week. And every Wednesday morning now, that, you know, based on the size of our staff, we do it at 9 a.m. And everybody on the team talks about something they're grateful for and something they're excited about. And I'm sorry, I'm getting a little choked up. It doesn't have to be work related, first of all. But what it does is it opens a communication with your people that you can really know these people. And when you really know them and you really know what's going on in people's worlds, you have the ability to support them. And if you support them, they will support you. And we've had gratitude meetings where somebody's brother-in-law passed away, like 8 hours before, and she showed up to work. And I was floored. In fact, we sent her home. We flew her to Florida to go be with her family because, like, if we hadn't had that meeting, we wouldn't have known. And we wouldn't have understood what was going on in her world. And we have, in this industry, we're dealing with a lot of issues like burnout and vicarious trauma for your therapists and organizational trauma. Communicate with your people because everybody's struggling with something that you don't know about. Always. And if they're not at a point where they need help, then that's cool. They're going to help somebody else who needs it. You know, and you never know when it's going to be your day. I had one not that long ago, and we all hung up, I don't know, 9:45, 9:50, something like that. And I got 4 phone calls from people going, hey, what's going on? Can I help you with something? Shit, you talk about a way to support your people. It was amazing. And again, you build the culture that you want. That communication is everything. Another thing we do at our organization is team reading materials. You know, on the sales team, we're reading books together and we're discussing, you know, the different books, we're discussing the opportunities, we're discussing, get to know your people, you know, talk to them. Give a shit. Give a shit calls. I think somebody had mentioned that earlier. Do your check-ins. You know, Dana, was that your name? I'm sorry, Darcy?
Darcy. Yeah.
Darcy had talked about that on a regular basis. Do a give a shit call. How are you doing? I just care, right? That's it. Just want to know how you're getting. How many of you walk by your staff in the hallway? Or hide, like, you know, when somebody's going by because you don't want to necessarily have a conversation. Those are things that you kind of rephrase that a little bit, and it really goes a long way. Be on the lookout for changes in attitude, for trauma, for regular illness. You know, maybe somebody's taking a lot of days off. Maybe somebody's late. Inefficiencies in processes that you have organizationally that may be putting more work on them. Again, I work in compliance. The complaints that I hear about compliance documentation and inefficient systems for doing that, what that does is it puts so much more strain on your staff. It makes them work much harder than it needs to be, and it just creates extra stress, extra kind of fans the flames for that burnout, right? And it makes it that much harder. Be cognizant of out of work issues. You know, I had a conversation with one of our teammates recently, and we talked twice a week, him and me, and I noticed his attitude was changing. Hey, I'm smelling something in the air, what's going on? And he says, my girlfriend and I broke up, and I'm just having a really hard time. And yes, it was supposed to be a meeting around finances, right? And it was supposed to be a meeting around certain things. Don't be rigid. Like, you see somebody struggling with something, give them some love, man. Give them some love. They will appreciate it. And people, there's so many out of work issues going on. Kids, COVID, access to information, crap. You see what we see on social media. You know, I don't care whether you're, you know, Democrat, Republican, whatever side you are, you're stressed out. If you're paying attention to that, you're stressed out one way or the other. And it's designed to keep us in that cycle. That is tremendously traumatic and stressful for people. You know, one, try to keep that out of the office if you can, but definitely be aware of when somebody's struggling and somebody's suffering. As far as communication goes, look at, there's certain data points that you can be pulling from here. You know, look at time off and the reason why people are taking time off. Look at your grievances. You can see when somebody's frustrated or overwhelmed by grievances. Staff satisfaction surveys, of course, incident reports, and your exit interviews. I want to talk about compensation. It's very rarely the main reason why people leave. And if it is the reason that people are telling you why they're leaving, they're not comfortable enough to talk with you. So, pay should be competitive, but it doesn't need to be the best around if you've got a work environment that people are comfortable and feel safe in. Think about our benefits though, because there's a lot of benefits that you can offer that can make a really nice work environment for people that can be very valuable other than compensation, right? You know, maybe a gym membership or a contribution to smoking cessation program or continued education. Once a week, bring a meal to the office. Show them you appreciate them. These are ways that you can do that. You can do Employee of the Month. Have it voted on